In American politics, loyalty is currency. And in the modern Republican Party, loyalty to Donald Trump has often been treated as non-negotiable. You defend him publicly, you criticize him privately, if at all, and you never, ever break ranks in a way that gives the other side ammunition. That's been the unspoken rule for years now, which is exactly why the recent decision by a top Republican senator to openly criticize a probe into Federal Reserve Chair Jay Powell has landed like a political earthquake. This wasn't a quiet disagreement. This wasn't a carefully worded dodge. This was a clear signal that something deeper is shifting beneath the surface of the GOP, and it may be happening faster than many people expected. To really grasp why this matters, we need to step back and understand what makes Jay Powell such a powerful and controversial figure in American life. Powell isn't a politician in the traditional sense. He doesn't campaign. He doesn't hold rallies. He doesn't trade insults on social media. And yet, few individuals have more influence over the day-to-day economic reality of Americans than the chair of the Federal Reserve. Interest rates, inflation, employment levels, housing affordability, these aren't abstract concepts. They decide whether families can buy homes, whether small businesses can survive, and whether people feel optimistic or anxious about the future. Powell sits at the center of all of it, and that makes him an irresistible target in a political era where economic frustration is everywhere. Donald Trump's relationship with Powell has always been tense, and the irony is impossible to ignore. Trump appointed him. At the time, Powell was seen as a safe choice, a steady hand, someone who wouldn't rock the boat. But once Powell began prioritizing inflation control over political convenience, Trump's tone shifted sharply. Public criticism turned into outright hostility. Trump accused Powell of sabotaging the economy, questioned his intelligence, and openly floated the idea of removing him, an unprecedented move that sent tremors through financial markets. Those comments weren't just expressions of frustration. They were warnings, and everyone in Washington understood what they meant. Fast forward to today, and that long-simmering tension has boiled over into a probe that many see as political in nature. Supporters argue it's about accountability, transparency, and oversight. But critics, on both sides of the aisle, see something else entirely, a dangerous precedent where the Federal Reserve becomes just another battlefield in partisan warfare. And when a senior Republican senator publicly criticizes that probe, it changes the entire equation. This isn't a Democrat defending Powell. This is a Republican saying, in effect, this goes too far. What makes this moment especially striking is the identity of the senator involved. This isn't a political lightweight. This isn't someone with nothing to lose. This is a figure with real influence, real relationships, and real standing inside the Republican Party. When someone like that speaks out, it sends a message, not just to voters, but to fellow lawmakers who may feel the same way but lack the courage or political cover to say it themselves. One voice becomes two become five, and suddenly, what looked like ironclad unity starts to crack. At its core, this disagreement isn't really about Jay Powell. It's about power. It's about whether institutions like the Federal Reserve still exist outside the reach of political retaliation. For decades, both parties agreed, sometimes reluctantly, that the Fed's independence was essential to economic stability. The idea was simple. Monetary policy should be guided by data and long-term thinking, not election cycles or personal grudges. Once that firewall collapses, everything becomes political. Interest rates become campaign tools. Inflation becomes a talking point rather than a problem to solve. And trust, already fragile, disappears completely. The senator's criticism reflects a deeper fear among establishment Republicans that the party is drifting away from conservative principles in favor of personality-driven politics. Small government, institutional restraint, and rule-based governance were once core GOP values. But under Trump's influence, those ideas have often taken a backseat to loyalty and confrontation. For many Republicans, especially those who came up in an earlier era, that shift is deeply uncomfortable. Speaking out against the Powell probe isn't just about defending the Fed, it's about drawing a line. Of course, Trump's allies see things very differently. They argue that Powell's policies have hurt ordinary Americans, that high interest rates are crushing families, and that scrutiny is not only justified but overdue. That message resonates with voters who feel squeezed by the economy and angry at elites. And politically, it's effective. Blaming the Fed provides a convenient target, someone powerful enough to hate but distant enough to dehumanize. The problem, as critics point out, is that turning the Federal Reserve into a partisan enemy doesn't fix inflation, it just destabilizes everything else. This internal Republican clash comes at a critical moment. The party is already navigating deep divisions over leadership, strategy, and identity. Is the GOP the party of Trump above all else? Or is it something broader, something that can survive beyond him? Every public disagreement chips away at the illusion of total unity. And while Trump remains enormously popular with the base, cracks among elites matter more than they appear. History shows that political movements rarely collapse because of voters alone. They fracture when leaders stop pretending. There's also the question of what this means for markets and global confidence. The US dollar, American bonds, and the Federal Reserve itself are pillars of the global financial system. When foreign investors see political leaders attacking the Fed, it sends a signal that instability may be coming. Even the perception of interference can raise borrowing costs, weaken confidence, and make economic recovery harder. This is why previous presidents, Republican and Democrat alike, largely avoided direct confrontation with the federal. They understood the risks. And that's exactly what this Republican senator is warning about now. Beyond economics, there's a moral dimension to this story that shouldn't be ignored. Democracies rely on norms just as much as laws. Some rules are written. Others are respected because breaking them causes long-term damage. When leaders start testing those boundaries, when investigations feel personal rather than principled, the system begins to erode. The senator's criticism is, in many ways, a plea to preserve those unwritten rules before they disappear entirely. And here's the part that many people miss. This may not be the last break we see. Once one senior Republican steps out of line, it becomes easier for others to follow. They may not do it loudly. They may choose their moments carefully. But the spell of absolute silence is broken. That alone changes the political landscape. Trump's power has always rested not just on popularity, but on fear. Fear of backlash. Fear of primaries. Fear of exile. Every public challenge weakens that grip just a little. So what happens next? In the short term, probably not much. Trump will lash out. Allies will circle the wagons. The senator may face criticism or pressure to walk back his comments. But the long-term impact is harder to ignore. This moment will be remembered, not because it ended Trump's influence, but because it revealed its limits. Even within a party built around loyalty, there are lines some Republicans are no longer willing to cross. In the end, this story isn't about left versus right. It's about the future of American governance. It's about whether institutions can survive the age of permanent political warfare. And it's about whether courage, quiet, measured, and imperfect, still has a place in a system increasingly driven by outrage. A Republican senator criticizing a probe into Powell may seem like a small thing. But in today's political climate, it's anything but. Because sometimes, the biggest shifts don't start with revolutions. They start with one person saying, "This isn't right."